Alright, hopefully this thing is capturing this time. Hi, I'm Al Madright, and those of you who may or may not have interest in this, I have actually been developing my own homebrew space exploration slash colonization game. I don't know what to call it yet, mostly because I don't know if it's going to work or not. One of the main things I've been experimenting with is true 50-50 odds, and it's not turning out so well. So, first of all, the story itself is that you, or the player, or players, are all like settlers and colonists and whatever else happens upon in the humanity's big, huge Exodus fleet. Like, we have ruined the Earth so badly that we all have to just pack up and leave. He said that his ship would be called the Wide Wench, which is a reference to something anyway. He says it looks like the space whale from Doctor Who, except, it's mechanical. So there it is. That's the space whale from Doctor Who, which is actually a mechanical thing from somewhere other than here, okay? Okay, see, specifically not organic, fully mechanical spaceship, the Wide Wench. It is a medium-sized science vessel where he started his character as a professor of medical science called John Utonium. He was an R&D medical technician with the skills for a doctor and leader and crafting and all that stuff. And he was put in charge of a retrovirus that the military had commanded his ship to build and, maintain. So he did. And one night, he gets a call from one of his technicians, and the virus has mutated. And he goes down and he checks it out, and he's like, yeah, it's mutated. The virus may be intelligent. It's evolving specific limbs to do specific jobs. More specifically, it looks like this new appendage it has is a weapon. And this is on a cellular level, you understand. So, he's genre savvy. And he's really genre savvy. He's like, okay, I don't want anyone to go near that room. I want the whole place locked down. I want droids to handle going back and forth in between rooms to make sure that no humans get infected. I want all of my staff shoved into a safe quarantine room and locked in there until further notice. And he did. But me actually trying to get things to happen, remember, we're on absolutely fair 50-50 dice rolls. And I'm rolling against him just so that I can get things to happen with the virus. And he is great at this. His first round, he is just a master. He outrolls me at every turn. I can't do jack with the virus. He has everything quarantined. He has everything cleaned. He has robots doing work. So I switched tactics on him. And from now on, he doesn't have physical contact with anyone else but the team he's working with. And he's got the military commander, or a military commander, we didn't establish that, ordering him by communications to continue working on the virus while drones and robots bring them supplies. Which actually starts out pretty horrible for me, because I'm like, okay, I need you to screw up. And he's like, no. It's like, okay, I'll make you screw up. And then he rolls the dice, and the dice says no. Like, for reference, this is a little dice. And it's got some dots on it. There. And the little dice says no. And it goes on and on and on like that, and I am forced to make concession after concession after concession, because he is beating me in every single roll. All the time, every time. Like, I have to allow him to go to different parts of the ship. I have to allow him to wander the halls and gather information, and the whole time he's trying to gather information, gather supplies. He's not stupid. He's very careful. He's checking everything. He's making sure that every area gets searched multiple times. So I know this, and he knows this, so I'm like, okay, all of the robots are armed, and their weapons are hot, and if you try to sneak anything past them, they will shoot you. And I'm like, okay, and he's like, okay. So we do that for a while, and nothing comes of it, because he's rolling too good for me to stop. So I'm like, okay, I'll give you a random event. He says, okay, what's the random event? One of your guys finds a pistol. And he's like, I can use that to overpower the robots. So he's like, I'll grab it, and I'll see if a guy can sneak around with it. And he doesn't, and he gets the guy shot. And that is like the first time all of this goes by, and he explains to the military officer, well, you know, we're all going nuts here. We can't do anything but work. It's really stressing us out, and it's making us make stupid mistakes. And while normally any commander in this situation would be like, well, I don't give a damn, get back to work, I couldn't, because again, the dice say no. Here, I'll illustrate my point. Here's a little dice, and it says no. There, another little dice that says no. This one's got 2 spots on it. And it says no. So he knows he can't get caught like that again, or else the droids are going to shoot him. So he says, you know what? I'm going to brief everybody on how to use a code language using our personal communication devices. And he's like, okay, I'm going to ask them things like, what's the weather like? And depending on what the room looks like to them, they will say, oh, it's very cloudy in here, meaning it's got potential, but they're not sure offhand. Or it's raining hard, meaning that everything is bad. They're going to ask, oh, what color is that test tube? And it's going to be like, oh, it's pretty clear, it's nice and blue, or that's a really bright red, or things like that. Saying that something was fully intact meant it would be useful for either continuing the experiment or a useful material for later. And that went on for a while. So after a while, I decided, well, okay, I can't let him get any more help, which probably, with hindsight, wasn't a very good idea. But I made it to where the military commander evacuated everybody else, literally everybody off the ship, at exactly the same time, like a disaster relief exit from the ship and onto the planet's surface. And he and his team were quarantined up in that one area of that one part of the ship. Let's say the science part is here. You know, that specifically is the science part they're locked into. And like they can't do anything else because they've exhausted all other avenues. He wants to walk around freely without the droids being and watching him. I've got no other choice because he's rolling that well. Let me get a picture of a dice saying no. There. Now it's saying no twice. So he keeps going, he builds up a nice little supply. He's got health kits and like technologies and different plants and different minerals and equipment, and he's gathering it all up in his little lab. And he specifies that he's packing it up and making it neat so that they can grab it and get out when the chance comes. And he also does an experiment, and this is the part that gets him. He does some kind of experiment where the virus itself is let out of its containment and ends up infecting 2 of his people. Now, he does everything he can to treat them. They've got all kinds of medicine, they got all kinds of skills, and he's like, fine, I'm going to try and treat them. One of them appears to be cured, while the other does not. And this is where it starts to go downhill for him, because after that, his luck takes a serious nosedive. I start to get the rolls I want with the virus, and the subjects that have been injected with the virus, their brains start to mutate and morph, and they start getting tumors on the outsides of their skulls. And he checks and he checks and he checks, and it turns out the tumors are actually secondary brains, but they're much more powerful brains. Like better, smarter, faster brains. I don't really know what a brain looks like, but there's a brain and there's a brain stem. I don't even know if I spelled that right. But it's like bigger and smarter brains are growing out of the brain that is already there. Like, this is what the virus is doing to them. And he's checking all this stuff in detail. He's like, we're going to make them run the maze. And they run the maze, and they run it faster and faster each time, to the point in which they don't actually do the maze. They climb over the walls and then walk around it. They respond to colors and signals, sometimes even before they can put the signals up. They feed them some less than decent quality food just to see what would happen, and he swears that the mice flipped him off because they didn't get the quality of food they wanted. Let me demonstrate this with a little drawing. This is a mouse, little triangle face with ears, and that's the mouse making the flip off gesture. Oh, great. Hold on a second. Sometimes my illustration techniques don't go so well. Mouse flipping off team. There, that's the mouse flipping the team off when they don't feed it the food it likes. And after a while, his luck still held steady for a while, but after a while, the brains popped out of the skulls. Like, physically popped out of the skulls. They were walking on, like, very thin, spindly limbs, but they popped out of the skull, and they walked off, and they breached their containment, and he ran like the wind. The virus has some kind of effect on the last infected crew member, or maybe he just went nuts and snapped. But his crew member attacks another crew member, and they try to fight off this woman. It is specified to be a woman. Let me attempt to illustrate this scene here. I'm gonna erase some of this stuff. It's like actually quite hard to erase black on black, but there's this woman. And she tries to attack a guy, and he's hurt. He's hurt bad. Oh boy, he's hurt. So then he's like, okay, we gotta get that under control, or else we're all gonna die. So he sends all of his other crew members after this person, one after another. He sends them all after this crew person, one after another. And he sends one guy, and that doesn't work. And he sends another guy, and that doesn't work. He sends another guy, and that doesn't work. And he breaks into the armory, and gets a gun, and tells the other guy to shoot at her. And that doesn't work. And they all sit there and try to bring down this one woman. And like he's got another female crew member who tries to fight off the woman, and that doesn't work. Like at this point, he's rolling badly, but he's still doing everything he can to keep this one crew member under control. And she is fighting tooth and nail. So he calls up the military commander for help. And he's like, could you send us some robots or some droids to try and take care of the situation? It turns out that all the other test specimens had different things pop out of them, and like just in an instant 16 freaking things go in there, show up in there as enemies. And the commander's like, yeah, I'll send in some robots. And he gets like a couple of regular robots, and they kill like 3 things, and then the things kill them. And then they finally get control of her. Like, somebody pinned her down. So it's just these two now. And so they've got her under control. But now they're worried about fighting off the 16 things that spawned. The regular robots kill like 3 of them, so the military commander's like, okay, I'll send in the actual battle droids this time. And he sends in a unit of 4 battle droids. And then the battle droids kill all but 4 of the creatures, and the creatures destroy the battle droids. And he's like, oh, can we get in there? Nope. Okay, we're gonna call up the commander, and we're gonna see if we can get more backup, because I don't want to have to kill this person, but I will if I have to. So it's been way too long at this point, and I want to get them down to the planet. Now remember, they're on this ship. They're on the little space whale ship, and I want to get them off the space whale ship so that they can go onto the planet. That's the planet right there. That looks stupid. But from the whale ship to the planet, so I'm like, okay, I'll try to call in more droids, and calling in the droids fails, like the signal's interrupted or there's interference or whatever. And he tries and he tries and he tries, but the military commander can't do it. He's going to have to destroy the ship. But, unfortunately, he left all of the equipment that he had gathered over all that time, tons of med kits, tons of materials, all that other stuff, and he had left it in the laboratory that now contained the 4 enemies. And, by the way, they figured out how to push the open door button, and now they're all rushing out. So, on top of that, they've got the 4 monsters, the crewman that went nuts, maybe, and he's like, okay, I'm gonna send this one expendable guy. He's got a list of characters here, and he's got one that doesn't really have that many skills. And he's like, okay, that's the stoner. I'm going to send the stoner to distract the monsters. And that works. And the woman is out cold from the fight they had. So she's not a problem anymore. So they take the fight. they're like, okay, everybody grab whatever you can get and put it in the escape pod. They'd already checked out the escape pods. Everything was fine. They'd even gotten a hold of the sensor array at some point and figured out part of the map. Now, what I did with the map was I've divided it into 9 sections. And I've divided the 9 sections into 9 sections. So it's a 9 square grid divided into 9 square grids. And he used the sensor array, and he's like, he found a plateau on a river or by a river, and it's a mostly jungle planet. It's very lush. There's a lot of life signs. And he's like, okay, we're going to land there. We're going to land on that plateau. So he gets in the ship and he flies off, and the military commander activates the self-destruct sequence. And everything's going to explode. Except it doesn't. For some strange reason, the signal fails. So, the space whale is still there. The mechanical space whale is still there. It hasn't blown up. He left behind the guy that he was going to use as a distraction for the 4 monsters. He left behind the person who snapped or whatever happened. And he just left. Unfortunately, he does not make it to the plateau. Instead, the pod crashes, and when it crashes, he loses some equipment. And he's like, well, okay, is my party alive? Yeah. Okay, so what can they do? Whatever. This is the colonization part of the game that I wanted to work out so well, so he starts trying to assign jobs to his people. Unfortunately, they're all bioengineers, they're all doctors, they're all scientists. They don't really know how to farm. And he's on the surface now. So he's on the surface, and it's divided into the grids. Pretend that actually looks good. And this is the little plateau mountain. And it's got a little river running through it. But he actually landed next to the river. That's his little ship with a little door. And this one has a river too, but there's all kinds of jungle trees because it's a jungle. That's my impersonation of a jungle tree. So he's like, okay, this is good. What kind of plants do we have? And he'd found a number of plants. He'd invaded the hydroponics lab and he'd gotten some plants. And he's like, okay, I'm going to take each of these crop plants and I'm going to plant them in different areas. So he had a heck of a time with his people getting lost. Because, well, they'd only just recently touched down. They didn't have scouting abilities. They didn't know where to go. They didn't know what to do. And he hadn't thought of that. So his people get lost just trying to walk in and out of this particular area where the campsite is. And then he's like, okay, I can't have everybody just go off and do whatever. I need them to be focused on one role so they can actually skill up. And I had originally envisioned, either on a critical success, which never happened, or after they succeeded so many times in a row, which never happened, that they would skill up and they would gain skills by actually doing the thing they were trying to skill in. And that didn't happen, because they actually failed quite a lot. He had a solar panel for generating power for all his gear and equipment, and it broke constantly. He had managed to build a water filtration and purification system, and it broke down constantly. His 3 farms idea didn't really pan out because a lot of the time the people either got lost trying to find the farm or they died while farming. And he asks me, hey, how did they die farming? And I'm like, I don't know. That's a very good question. So we decided, hey, what if, like in The Simpsons, when the guy steps on the rake, it like smashes his skull in? And I'm like, is that a thing? And he's like, yeah, I knew a guy who did that. So I'm like, okay, the guy steps on a rake and smashes his skull in. Just for illustrative purposes there. And this happens not once, not twice, but 3 times. Being a farmer is being more dangerous than being a scout. It's more dangerous than working with the electronics. It's more dangerous than trying to work with the water supply system. Thankfully, I had forgotten about needing to feed your people in your colony, because otherwise they would have died anyway. But so many people failed, like where they should have died. I just said, okay, you broke everything. And like at the end of it, he had barely managed to fix everything up, but it was getting to the point where he only had 3 people left. So I'm like, okay, I'll give you a whole bunch of random things that happen, and hopefully you'll have a burst of good luck and you'll be able to get by with what you've got. And he's like, okay, I'll take that. So I give him a bunch of random events. They don't really seem to be helping. It starts raining like monsoon season. Some stuff breaks. He keeps trying to test his people and find out, are they infected? Am I infected? Is everything okay? And they can't really tell, because even though the equipment is supposed to be in top condition, he can never use it correctly. His bunch of doctors and scientists that have gone to school to learn to mess with medical equipment, it doesn't actually work. So here, it's a little medical thingy. And that's why I use words. This is a medical thing. And it does not work. Like, ever. Technically, there's nothing wrong with it, but we're like, okay, all of this equipment has to be malfunctioning, because every time I roll for it, it fails. Technically, it was just his rolls, not the device, but we'll go with that. And so much of his stuff was breaking, so I give him some more random events. His main character actually dies trying to farm. as one of the 3 people who died trying to be a farmer. And by the way, they all died from the rake. The rake hit them all, and it hit them in the head, and then they died. Like, every single one of them. So he had another person take over the lead of his little colony, and her name is Tonya Zartona. And he's like, oh, she's Russian. Okay, she's Russian. But she talks in a Scottish accent, because I can't do a Russian one. So, okay, we've got a Russian lady who speaks with a Scottish accent. And now she's the leader. And, like, we've got some wild animals that show up. They look like little Bulbasaurs. Because, frankly, that's just what I'm going to call them anyway. Like, weird looking, stupid Bulbasaur looking thing. With the little flower on its back. And it's like... It's like, I want little beasts that come in and fruit grows off their body, and I want to be able to eat the fruit. Since my crops keep failing. I'm like, okay. So, basically, we've got little Bulbasaurs. That you can just pick food from. I'm like, okay, fine. Fruit that you can eat. Okay. And next he rolls, and I decide he's got so few people that that one of the dead guy's cell phones rings, and it's his stoner character. And his stoner character picks up with them and says that he's managed to dodge all of the monsters and the crazy crew member and whatever else is on board, and he wants to know where they are and how many of them are left. And he's like, okay, tell him to come here, but he's got to bring supplies from the ship. And he does. And so Mr. Space Whale has another escape pod pop out of him and drop back on the surface. At this point, he doesn't have any actual shelter built. Like, a lot of his crops are dead because his people don't know how to farm. He does have a successful cotton farm, and he does have an apple tree that is still growing. He's got a water purification and filtering system. And he decided to name the river that he's next to Styx. So the stoner guy shows up and brings some supplies, and luck of all luck, he succeeds with another random event, and another military guy from way elsewhere shows up and says, hey, I've got a base here. Would you like to come and live with us? Yeah, sorry about that. And he's like, yeah. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. We'll do that. So he gives the new military commander, it's not the same guy, he gives the new military commander his coordinates, and it turns out there's a lake which is attached to all of these rivers. Little lake thing attached to all the rivers. And they're like, okay, we live on a beach that's near a river. We'll go up the river and we'll contact you. And you meet us at the lake and we'll see what we can do about everything. Because apparently they're from a completely different ship that didn't have any technology or any technical crews, and while they've got a lot of supplies, they don't have a lot of knowledge. So they're going to meet up at this lake. And they're going to meet up here, and that's where I left it, because now I have to draw out all the stuff, and I have to make up all these new tables. I have to figure out a way to weight the system so that he'll actually survive with it still being relatively fair, because I don't want it to be unfair for me, because I actually want to do things so that he has a story to play. And I don't want it to be too unfair to him, because I don't want to instantly kill him off before I have the sort of data I need. Cancel. File. New. Don't save. So I've made it where he can give orders or, well, we're doing everything by dice, so he can roll 1d20 for an action with one particular person. I probably didn't spell that right. And he also has 3 action points which he can use to do things without necessarily having to fail at it. Like, each die roll, you have a chance of failing and a chance of it backfiring. And then there are the actions, which is like giving an order. Except it's a general order. Like, it can be a general order like, come back to base. Or everyone take a rest. Or some such fiddle-faddle. Faddle. I don't know what I spelled with that. But anyway, that's the way I'm going to do actions from now on. Now, honestly, I don't know how I'm going to weight this. I guess 1 in 3. I don't really know how I'm going to do that on dice. But I guess I'm going to take the d6. You know, the one that goes 1, 2, and so on. I guess I'm going to say, well, if you get either this number or this number or this number, or like if you can get a 3 or a 4, I'll let you do this, kind of like the way they do it in Warhammer. And then you'll succeed or fail at the action. That's a 3, and that's a 4. And that's a 5. And that's a 6. Like, 1 or 2, no. I'm gonna say like 6 is a crit. For those of you that don't know, like, crit is when something really good happens. Well, 1 would obviously be a bad crit, so when something really bad happens, like when somebody dies by stepping on a rake and busting their skull open, that's really bad. That's really good. That's good, and these two are just okay. Meanwhile, these two are bad. Like, that's 1 in 3 odds, basically. And I guess that's like how I'm gonna have to do it, because 50-50 is really not working out, and it's making the game very much longer, and very actually difficult to play for both of us. So right now he's got a cotton plantation set up, a water filtration system, so he's got his little escape pods. So he's got his little escape pods, and that's what he's using for shelter right now. His escape pods for shelter. He's got a water filter and purifier set up, like little square jug. Water goes in this little thingy and then goes through this thingy into another thingy. And it's like, it comes out filtered, because that's a filter. And then a water purifier. I'm probably misspelling everything, so don't worry about that. And this is a water cleaner doohickey. And then out comes clean water over here. You know, just for demonstrative purposes, that's basically what it looks like. A big thingy that you put water in, and then clean water comes out on the other side. He's got a solar device charger. It's like this thing that has like little solar panels on it. I can't actually draw solar panels. Like it's got little plugs and whatnot in it. This is a charger thing that he uses to charge his equipment and whatnot. And he's got cotton plants. Because he specifically requested that he be given cotton for some strange reason. And then he's got his little river named Styx. Yes, specifically that river. And somewhere on the other side of the river, somewhere else at some other place, he's got a little apple tree that's not actually full grown yet. I'm gonna try my best to make this actually look different. And those will be the little baby apples, I guess. He's got an apple tree, and that's about it. Like, he did have food crops, but he failed so much they died, and then anybody who tried to tend the crops again got themselves killed by smashing themselves in the face with a rake so hard that they died. And that's what he's got. But now I have to make up a military base. or a military colony. Like, okay, not that. So the other military base. Okay. It's gonna have some mud huts. There. Mud hut. Well, might as well, since it's there. No, not that one. Like some mud huts and like a giant comms device, which is how the military people found his camp. Like a lot of things with things. Like those are satellite dishes or something. There's a comms thing and like an armory and a tool shed. Just some stuff like that so that I can actually develop things and hopefully get this game back in the direction I wanted to go. So that's what I've been doing for a while, and I hope this works out. And maybe in a few years you might see Al's space colonization extreme survival game pop ups at some point eventually, maybe.